Sophie.
And I'm Sally.
And today we want to talk about something that has come up in almost every conversation I've had with other parents who are impacted by serious mental illness and psychosis in their children. And that is what I have fondly come to call the "why won't she get off the couch" problem. So in our case, it was a little different because you actually like to take really long walks, and that didn't change in psychosis. So it wasn't the fact that you were sitting around all day, but I often felt that I would ask you to do things, simple things, that I expected you to do as part of the household, and you wouldn't or couldn't do it, and that led to huge frustration. So what were you experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in psychosis, I was just living in a completely different reality. I feel like one of my primary symptoms was delusions more than hallucinations. So I genuinely believed for 9 months that I was living in a psychological experiment where psychologists were experimenting on me against my will. I believed everyone around me was a paid actor, and I believed my parents were wearing tiny earbuds that were through which the psychologists were feeding them lines. So I really believed every circumstance of my life was Truman Showed, if you've seen that movie. So yeah, in that kind of situation, it really doesn't make a lot of logical sense to do chores because I believed I was just biding my time until the experiment would end, and then I'd be rich and famous and I could just pay other people to do chores for me. So why would I need to practice? So yeah, you would ask me to do chores, and I think the biggest difference from if I wasn't experiencing psychosis and you asked me to do chores is like I would feel like I was hurting you if I didn't do the chore. Like I would feel like I was being a jerk. But I didn't think of it that way because I was living in a psychological experiment. So I just didn't really understand that it was hurting you or affecting you if I didn't do a chore. So I just never did anything for 9 months.
But then after you were out of psychosis and you were in the process of recovery, it still remained a problem. So what do you think that was about?
I remember very clearly us having a conversation in therapy where you had asked me to go to my aunt's house, which was about a 10-minute walk away, and pick up her dog on a daily basis, and I just wasn't doing it. And we had this great talk where I just talked about how on the walk, all of my worst anxieties were just amplified and just eating away at me for those 10 minutes there and 10 minutes back, because I had nothing to distract myself, and how it was just very challenging because I was so depressed and so anxious to do that. So that was also because of mental illness, but it was a completely different thing where my depression and anxiety was just really impeding my ability to function or to get, things done.
I mean, it's interesting what you say about anxiety, because one of the things that parents have told me is like they see their child playing video games or doing the things they want to do, getting up and making a snack, but they won't do the things that their parents are asking to do, chores like their siblings might be doing. And I think that as parents, we often don't stop to think that there may be anxiety and emotions attached to those things. Would that reflect what you were saying?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, with the dog example, I really don't think you viewed it as something that would make me anxious. In fact, I think you talked to me about like picking up a cute puppy and going on a walk, getting like some physical exercise might help your anxiety, but it really wasn't like that. Like I could do things that were more involved, like clean a table or something like that, but just the walk was really challenging. So I think having that communication where I was finally able to explain to you in therapy why it was difficult for me was really helpful.
One of the things I've learned in my years of dealing with kids who are in psychosis is that there's a certain amount of regression or returning to a more childlike state that takes place. And so the expectations that we have of our kids while they're experiencing psychosis may be too high. And what I've said often to you, Sally, is that if only I had known that it was okay for me to step in and do your chores, it would have made things so much easier on both of us. Because it wasn't that I didn't mind that I was doing laundry or maybe picking up clutter or doing the dishes. It's that in the back of my mind, I had this idea that if I was a good parent, I would be fostering a sense of responsibility for you, or I would be teaching you to take care of yourself, or all of these shoulds that were in my head. And what I know now is that it really wasn't the time for that. You weren't in a position where you were going to learn any of those things anyway. So I think we both would have been a lot happier if I had just gone ahead and taken care of the house without getting all tangled up in what you ought or ought not to be doing. Would you agree with that?
I really like what you said about you weren't in a position to learn those skills. I think that's a really good point. I was just in the most basic, like trying to survive in the most literal sense, just sort of not fight or flight, but just survival instincts level of mental health. And it was not a time for me to build character. It was just a time for me to rebuild. And I mean, I think it rarely works when you sit your kid down and you're like, you're going to do this, like regardless of what that thing is. But I think when your child is experiencing serious mental illness, I mean, the first and foremost thing is that they stabilize and improve their health. And then they can work on things like building character and building a work ethic and things like that.
One of the pieces of advice I got during our journey was that if there was something that really bothered me, that I could insist on compliance with that thing. So for some parents, it's smoking in the house. And actually, now that I think about it, you never smoked in the house because you probably knew that that would bother me. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I never wanted to be a burden or to do things that would hurt you, which is kind of what I was saying when I believed my life was in a psychological experiment. But like the reason I was such a pain in so many ways was because I really did not understand I was hurting you. Yeah. And even when I was out of psychosis, when I didn't do chores, I tried to not do them in ways that wouldn't hurt you or that would hurt you the least or inconvenience you the least.
Yeah, I see now that you really were sensitive to my needs in the household, but I think it gets back to the same piece of advice that it's a time to really think hard about what we can let go of as parents. And if there's something that really, really bothers us, and as parents, only we know what that is going to be, then to make it very clear what the expectations are and use praise when the thing is done and absolutely stay away from criticizing when it's not.
Yeah, I think what you said about stating your needs is really important. Like if there's a thing you needed me to do, or else you would feel completely unloved and you expressed it to me that way, I think I would have been capable of doing that. But it was like, kind of like you said, you didn't mind doing laundry, and I could tell you didn't mind doing laundry, and I really was not in a place to do my own laundry. And it's hard to admit that as a 25-year-old, or at the time a 24-year-old or a 23-year-old, but it was not on the table for me. And that's not to say that I didn't grow out of that. I didn't recover from that, and it got back on the table. I do my own laundry now, but there was a time where, yeah, I mean, it would have been easier for everyone if we had just sort of accepted that that was not something that was going to happen.
Do you have any other advice for parents in this situation?
I just think communication is so key. I mean, if you had asked me, why didn't you do the dishes? That was the one thing you consistently asked me to do while I was in psychosis, and I would sort of have to do them. And if you'd asked me, why didn't you finish them? I would have said, because we're in a psychological experiment where nothing matters and I have all this existential dread, like something along those lines. But I think even after psychosis, like you were just like, hey, you didn't pick up the dog. Like, why didn't you pick up the dog, rather than asking, you would say you didn't pick up the dog in this kind of like punitive way, like you need to do that. But if you had asked, why didn't you pick up the dog, in like a gentle way and really listened to my answer and just sort of opened up that avenue for communication, I would have been able to say, like, those 10 minutes when I'm walking and I don't have anything else going through my head is when my brain jumps to like my worst fears and my deepest insecurities, and it is so painful for me. So I think being able to listen without judgment is going to get you really far in terms of communication.
So I picked up on two things you said that I think are really important. You and I talk a lot about how one of the things we want to share with people is that someone in psychosis still has access to reason and logic and is able to communicate what they're thinking and feeling. It may not reflect the reality that I'm feeling, but there's still a lot of good information you could have given me if only I could have asked. So the two things you said were to ask how you were feeling or thinking, and also to use a gentle tone. Can you tell me why the gentle tone is important?
I mean, if you are hostile to someone, you're going to be met with hostility. I think that was true during psychosis for me. That was true after psychosis. It's so hard to like talk about your own shortcomings as someone with mental illness or as anyone. And so it's just really important to make it a safe environment for the person who's talking about why they're not doing chores.
So to sum up for you parents out there, I know how hard this is, trust me. But if there's one piece of advice I can give you, it's to let things go. Let go of your expectations that everything has to be perfect. Listen, it's natural to feel resentful if your child appears not to be willing to do the simplest things around the house. But just remind yourself that they're going through a lot right now. And if you can just let go of expectations, that'll really go a long way in helping you not feel resentful.